I was holding brightly wrapped gifts for my grandchildren, my heart full of warmth before dinner, at my son's family home in honor of Thanksgiving. Suddenly, my phone rang, a text message from my partner. "Don't go to dinner tonight. You need to know something about your son." His words struck me like lightning, shattering the illusion of family comfort. "You won't believe the truth," he revealed to me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My phone buzzed against the mahogany desk, the vibration loud in the November silence. I'd been alone in my office for the past 3 hours, reviewing blueprints for the Henderson project, and the interruption made me flinch. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 2 months. Kevin. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the green button, then pulled back. 4 rings. 5. What could he possibly want now? On the 6th ring, I answered, "Dad? It's me." His voice carried that forced cheerfulness I'd heard him use with difficult clients. "Listen, I know we haven't talked, but Thanksgiving is coming up. Jennifer and I would really like you to come to dinner." The words landed like stones in still water. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Outside my window, Seattle's skyline was turning gray with approaching rain. "I wasn't expecting this call," I finally managed. "I know, but the kids keep asking about Grandpa, and, well, family should be together for the holidays." Family should be together. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I was standing in this same office, late September afternoon. Kevin had stormed in without knocking, his face already flushed with anger. He'd positioned himself on the opposite side of my desk, hands planted flat on the surface, leaning forward like a prosecutor confronting a hostile witness. "You're holding this company back." The words had come out sharp, clipped. "Your old-fashioned ideas are costing us millions." I'd remained seated, keeping my voice level despite the heat rising in my chest. "I built this firm from nothing. You've been here 8 years, and you think you know better? You're stuck in the past." He'd started pacing then, gesturing wildly toward the framed architectural drawings on the walls, projects I'd poured my soul into. "Either hand over control now, or I'll find another way." I'd stood up then, slowly, meeting his eyes across the desk. "This company isn't something you inherit like furniture. It's earned." His face had gone from red to nearly purple. He'd slammed his fist down so hard that my coffee cup jumped, leaving a brown ring on the blueprint I'd been reviewing. For a moment, we just stared at each other, father and son, architect and junior partner, 2 men who'd forgotten how to speak the same language. "You'll regret not giving me what I deserve." He'd spun on his heel and marched out. The door slammed with enough force that the framed drawings rattled against the walls. I'd listened to his footsteps echo down the hallway, growing fainter until the elevator chimed and carried him away. I hadn't heard from him since, not a word, not even through Jennifer. "Dad, you still there?" Kevin's voice on the phone pulled me back to the present. My knuckles were white where I gripped the edge of the desk. "What about what you said?" My throat felt tight. "About me being outdated, holding everything back?" A pause. I heard him breathe out slowly. "Can we talk about that in person? Please, Dad, just come to dinner." I looked at the framed photo on my desk. Kevin and me at the company's 25th anniversary party, both of us wearing genuine smiles, his arm around my shoulders. When had that stopped being real? When had my son started seeing me as an obstacle instead of a father? "The kids really miss you," Kevin added, his voice softer now. "Olivia keeps asking when Grandpa is coming to visit. Ethan wants to show you the treehouse Jennifer's brother helped him build." "Olivia?" "Ethan. 7 and 5 years old. They shouldn't suffer because their father and grandfather couldn't find common ground." "All right," I heard myself say. "What time?" 5 o'clock. Jennifer's making that braised short rib you love, and her apple pie. I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat motionless for a long moment. The office felt different somehow. The same furniture, same view, but the air had changed. Rain began pattering against the window. I reached out and traced the edge of the photo frame, remembering when Kevin had looked at me with pride instead of contempt. Maybe people could change. Maybe he'd realized that family mattered more than corporate control. Maybe this dinner was his way of apologizing without having to say the words directly. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it. I pulled out my phone and started a shopping list for the kids. The morning came with typical Seattle drizzle. I pushed through the glass doors of our building at 8:30, balancing my coffee and briefcase while nodding to Maria at the reception desk. She smiled and returned to her computer screen. Everything felt normal. The hum of the heating system, the faint smell of fresh paint from the renovation project 2 floors down, the familiar creak of the elevator. My office looked exactly as I'd left it. The blueprint from yesterday still spread across my desk, the coffee ring still visible in the corner. I settled into my chair and opened my email, scanning through project updates and client inquiries. The Henderson proposal needed final revisions. The Morrison Street development required permit documentation. Ordinary problems. Solvable problems. Dennis arrived around 10, rapping twice on my doorframe before entering. My business partner and I had known each other for 35 years, met in graduate school, started this firm together with nothing but ambition and a maxed-out credit card. He could read my moods better than anyone. "Morning," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. He set his coffee down carefully, watching me with those sharp gray eyes. "You look different. Something happened?" I couldn't help the small smile. "Kevin called yesterday. He invited me to Thanksgiving dinner." Dennis's expression changed. Not dramatically, just a subtle tightening around his mouth. A fractional pause before he reached for his coffee. "Really? After everything that happened?" "I think he's ready to apologize. He mentioned the grandkids, how they miss me." "Eugene?" Dennis set the cup down without drinking. "I need to tell you something. I've noticed some unusual activity." "Dennis, please." I held up my hand. "This is my son. He's reaching out. I have to believe people can change." He studied me for a long moment, conflict playing across his features. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Just be careful. That's all I'm asking." "I'm always careful." After he left, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to the dinner. What would I say to Kevin? How would I respond if he actually apologized? The morning passed in routine meetings, a conference call with contractors, a design review with our junior architects, paperwork that required signatures. After lunch, I drove downtown to Westlake Center. The mall was already decorated for the holidays. Artificial snow dusting the window displays, recorded music drifting through the corridors. I found an upscale toy store tucked between a jewelry shop and a clothing boutique. The building set for Ethan caught my eye immediately. A premium architectural model kit with sustainable wood pieces, everything a young builder could want. $150. I picked it up, examined the box, imagined his face when he opened it. For Olivia, I selected a Deluxe art supplies set, professional-grade colored pencils and watercolors in a wooden case. $180. She'd been drawing since she could hold a crayon, creating elaborate scenes with careful detail. At the checkout counter, a young clerk with purple-streaked hair rang up my purchases while chattering about holiday deals. I barely heard her. I was thinking about Thanksgiving, about seeing my grandchildren again, about the possibility of repairing what seemed irreparably broken. I carried the bags to my car, placed them carefully in the passenger seat. The parking lot was filling up with afternoon shoppers. I was reaching for my keys when my phone buzzed. Text message. "Dennis, don't go to that dinner tonight. You need to know something about your son." My stomach dropped. I stared at the words, reading them twice, 3 times. My fingers moved automatically, calling Dennis. He answered on the first ring. "Dennis, what's going on? What do you mean, don't go to dinner?" "I can't explain this over the phone." His voice sounded strained, urgent in a way I'd never heard before. "Where are you right now?" "I just bought gifts for Olivia and Ethan. I'm at the Westlake Center parking lot. Meet me at Morrison's Coffee in 20 minutes. This can't wait." "You're scaring me. Just tell me what—" 20 minutes, Eugene. Please." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the wrapped packages beside me. The architectural set, the art supplies, physical evidence of my hope, my desperate need to believe that Kevin had called because he wanted reconciliation, not because he wanted something else. What had Dennis found? What could possibly be serious enough to warrant this urgency, this fear in his voice? I started the engine and pulled out of the parking space, turning the car toward the office district. Traffic was moderate, the afternoon sun breaking through clouds in scattered patches. My mind raced through possibilities. Corporate irregularities, Dennis had mentioned this morning. Unusual access requests. Papers being copied after hours. The coffee shop was 15 minutes away. 15 minutes to prepare myself for whatever revelation was about to shatter my fragile hope. I pressed harder on the accelerator. Whatever Dennis had found, it was serious enough to make him break our 35-year pattern of never interfering in each other's family matters. Morrison's Coffee sat 3 blocks from our office, a small establishment Dennis and I had favored for years. His silver Mercedes was already parked near the entrance when I pulled in. The wrapped gifts for Olivia and Ethan stared at me from the passenger seat. Bright paper, cheerful bows, evidence of how thoroughly I'd been fooled. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe normally. Then I got out and walked inside. Dennis occupied a corner table, far from the handful of other customers. A manila folder sat in front of him like a loaded weapon. His face looked older than it had this morning, lines carved deeper around his mouth and eyes. I sat across from him without removing my jacket. Just show me what you found. I'm sorry, Eugene. I really hoped I was wrong about this. He slid the folder toward me. I opened it. The first item was a photograph. Kevin entering a glass-fronted office building, briefcase in hand, looking over his shoulder as if checking whether anyone was watching. The date stamp read 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Linda noticed Kevin accessing files he shouldn't have been reviewing, Dennis said quietly. Partnership agreements, financial records, documents requiring both our signatures for release. I flipped to the next photograph. Same building, different date. Then another. 4 separate visits, spanning the past month. I hired an investigator. Dennis's voice carried guilt and defiance in equal measure. I know I should have told you, but you did the right thing. I didn't look up from the folder. Show me everything. The next photograph made my chest tighten. Kevin sat across a desk from a man in his 50s, both leaning forward in obvious conspiracy. The nameplate on the desk read, Marcus Webb, attorney at law. Kevin's been meeting with Marcus Webb, Dennis explained, a corporate attorney who specializes in hostile takeovers and competency challenges. The word hung in the air between us. Competency challenges. You mean he's trying to declare me unfit? My voice came out flat, emotionless. Inside, something was cracking. The investigator found draft documents. Dennis pulled out photocopied pages, spreading them across the table. They're building a case that you're too old, that your decisions are hurting the company financially. I picked up one of the pages, an internal memo, dated 2 weeks ago, marked with my signature. I'd never seen it before. The content described a supposedly disastrous meeting with a client, the Henderson project we'd actually won, painted as evidence of my declining professional judgment. These signatures, I touched the forged ink. He forged my handwriting on internal memos. A flash of memory. Kevin at 7 years old, sitting at our kitchen table, practicing cursive letters. I'd guided his hand, showing him how to form each curve. Now that same hand had learned to mimic mine for purposes of deception. Creating a pattern, Dennis confirmed. Each one shows a supposed error in judgment. Things clients never complained about, but it looks official on paper. More documents followed. Notes in Kevin's handwriting about father's declining capacity. A draft petition for an emergency shareholder meeting. Copies of emails to junior partners suggesting I planned to sell the firm without consulting anyone. And the Thanksgiving dinner? I heard myself ask. Dennis met my eyes. My guess? Get you comfortable. Maybe have you sign something casual. Just a family document. Or simply keep you distracted while final pieces fell into place. The coffee shop felt very quiet. Somewhere behind us, the espresso machine hissed. A customer laughed at something on their phone. Normal sounds from a normal world that no longer included me. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Kevin. Not feeling well. Won't make dinner tonight. Sorry. Short. Simple. The lie tasted bitter, even as text. I hit send. I need copies of all this, I said, photographing each document with steady hands. Already made them. They're in the car. Dennis paused. What are you going to do? Dennis ordered 2 coffees from a passing barista. Neither of us touched them when they arrived. They sat cooling between us, steam rising and dissipating, as irrelevant as everything else except the evidence spread across the table. I made notes on a napkin. Names, dates, Next steps. My hands had stopped shaking. My voice was steady. The hurt father was gone, replaced by something colder and more dangerous. A man who'd built an empire from nothing and would not watch it stolen by his own blood. First, I'm canceling dinner, I said. Then I'm going to protect what we built. I stood, folder pressed against my ribs like armor. Dennis stood with me. We'd built this company together 30 years ago, two young architects with a dream. Now we'd defend it the same way, together. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago. I sat in my home office, staring at my phone screen. 7 missed calls from Kevin, 3 from Jennifer. 1 voicemail I hadn't found the courage to hear. Sleep hadn't come. I'd spent the night reviewing Dennis's evidence, making lists, cross-referencing dates. The manila folder sat open on my desk, photographs arranged in chronological order, like stations of betrayal. Dawn had arrived without my noticing, gray light filtering through the windows. I pressed play on the voicemail. "Dad, it's me." Kevin's voice carried an edge of irritation wrapped in false concern. "I'm concerned about you. Just a text saying you're sick? You couldn't call? Jennifer made your favorite dinner. The kids waited by the window. Look, I hope you're okay, but this feels... I don't know. Call me when you get this." The performance was masterful. Wounded son, worried father-in-law, disappointed parent of heartbroken children. If I hadn't seen the evidence, I might have felt guilty. I deleted the message and dialed a different number. "Adams and Associates. How may I help you?" "Robert Adams, please. This is Eugene Clark. I need an emergency appointment this morning." The receptionist hesitated. "Mr. Adams is fully booked today." "Tell him it involves corporate fraud. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I'd used Adams twice before for contract reviews, a sharp attorney in his mid-50s who charged premium rates and earned them. When I arrived at his downtown office, he was already waiting, door open, expression alert. "Eugene, come in. What's happened?" I laid the folder on his conference table and watched his face change as he examined each photograph, each forged document, each piece of my son's conspiracy. "My son is trying to steal my company," I said simply. Adams took notes in precise handwriting. "That's a serious allegation. Walk me through what you know." I did. The forged signatures, the fake client complaints, the meetings with Marcus Webb, the competency challenge being built brick by brick. Adams listened without interrupting, occasionally pausing to photograph a document with his phone. "These signatures..." He held up the memo about the Henderson project. "You're certain you didn't sign these memos?" "I've never seen these documents before yesterday." He set down the page carefully. "I recommend a full forensic audit of all his activities. Every file, every transaction, every communication." "How long will that take?" "A week, maybe 2. But Eugene, if he's done this much, there's more. Men who forge signatures don't stop at one crime." The words settled in my chest. "Do whatever's necessary. I want everything." Adams made 3 phone calls while I sat in his office. By early afternoon, preliminary findings began arriving via email. He read them aloud, his voice growing tighter with each revelation. Kevin had created fake email accounts posing as dissatisfied clients, sent complaints to our company address to build his paper trail, approached 2 junior partners, telling them I planned to sell the firm without informing staff, accessed my computer using administrative override. IT confirmed the timestamps. "For the record," Adams said, looking up from his laptop, "what has your relationship with Kevin been like professionally?" I thought about Cornell, the proud phone call when Kevin was accepted. 4 years of tuition, room, board, every semester paid in full. $250,000 total. "I gave him everything," I said. "Paid for Cornell, $250,000. Hired him straight out of school when he had no experience. Bought his house as a wedding gift, another $400,000. Adams's pen paused on his notepad. "And he had no ownership stake in the company?" "No. I built this firm before he was born. He got a generous salary, benefits, title. Vice president at 32 years old." I heard the bitterness creeping into my voice and didn't try to stop it. That wasn't enough. Another memory surfaced. Kevin's graduation from Cornell. I'd sat in the crowd of parents, watching him cross the stage, feeling pride swell in my chest so fiercely I thought I might burst. I'd framed his diploma myself, hung it in his first office at the firm. That diploma had cost me $250,000. This betrayal was priceless. Adams outlined the strategy. Document everything. Prepare for formal investigation. Protect my interests. Consider removing Kevin from company positions immediately. Each recommendation made sense. Each one felt like admitting my son was truly capable of this. I'll need a retainer, Adams said. Given the scope of work, $15,000 to start. I wrote the check without hesitation. I'd written another check this size once before, Kevin's first semester at Cornell. He'd called me crying with gratitude, promising to make me proud. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life entirely. Adams assigned a paralegal to begin document review immediately. By the time I left his office, the machine was in motion. Corporate attorneys, forensic auditors, IT specialists, combing through digital records. The cost would be substantial. I didn't care. I walked out into the late afternoon Seattle rain. My phone buzzed again, Kevin calling for the 8th time. I sent it to voicemail and kept walking. He wanted to talk to a father, but I wasn't a father anymore. I was a man protecting what he'd built, and I'd only just begun. 2 days later, I sat in our conference room with Dennis and Robert Adams. Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, turning the city into a watercolor of grays and silvers. A whiteboard stood at one end of the room, blank and waiting. This was where we'd architect my counterattack. I'd spent 48 hours reviewing Adams's preliminary findings. Food barely interested me. Sleep came in fitful patches. But my mind felt sharper than it had in months, focused to a fine point by anger and purpose. We spread the materials across the conference table. Evidence folders, legal precedents, corporate bylaws, financial records. Dennis had brought a carafe of coffee and 3 mugs from the break room. Adams opened his laptop and pulled up a document that made my stomach tighten. A comprehensive list of Kevin's manipulations, organized by category and severity. We need to be methodical, Adams said, uncapping a dry erase marker. Rush this, and Kevin could destroy evidence or create legal complications. How long before we can move? I asked. 1 week to secure everything. Then we announce the audit. Dennis leaned forward. He'll know something's wrong the moment we announce it. Good. The word came out harder than I intended. I want him to know. Adams began drawing on the whiteboard, creating 3 columns with precise strokes. Above them he wrote, Audit, Restructure, Investigation. 3 prongs, he explained. First, the audit creates official record. Every forged document, every fake complaint, every manipulation, all documented by independent auditors with no connection to your family dynamics. What if he tries to delete files? Dennis asked. Adams smiled thinly. It has already created backup of entire server. He can't erase what we've preserved. I studied the whiteboard, making notes on my legal pad, creating my own timeline parallel to Adams's. What about the corporate restructure? New bylaws make hostile takeover impossible. Requires unanimous board consent for leadership changes, enhanced oversight, mandatory ethics reviews. Even if he somehow convinced other stakeholders, he couldn't force you out. The second column filled with legal terms I'd need to research later. Dennis photographed the whiteboard with his phone, preserving our battle plan. I want to bring in Daryl Scott, Adams continued. Former FBI, specializes in corporate fraud. He'll document everything, Kevin's meetings with Webb, any financial irregularities, the full scope of his activities. How much? 10,000 retainer, then hourly? I didn't hesitate. Hire him today. Adams slid the investigator's contract across the table. I reviewed it quickly and signed. My phone buzzed. Another text from Kevin. Dad, really worried about you. Haven't heard from you in days. Please let me know you're okay. The kids are asking about you. I showed the screen to Dennis and Adams. Neither spoke, but I saw Dennis's jaw tighten. Are you going to respond? Adams asked. No. Let him wonder. Let him think he's winning. We divided responsibilities. Dennis would handle internal communications when the time came, preparing staff for disruption without revealing specifics. Adams would coordinate legal moves, filing necessary documents, briefing the auditors. I'd approve everything, sign what needed signing, maintain final authority. Adams reviewed the costs. Audit, $25,000. Investigator retainer, $10,000. Legal restructuring, $8,000. Ongoing attorney fees could reach $50,000 or more depending on Kevin's response. I'd built a company worth $8 million. I'd spend whatever was necessary to protect it. Dennis set down his coffee. He hadn't drunk any, I noticed. Neither had I. The cup sat cooling between us, forgotten. Eugene, Dennis's voice carried weight I recognized from 3 decades of partnership. Once we do this, there's no going back. This is your son. I looked at him for a long moment. Outside, rain intensified against the windows, driven sideways by wind off the bay. He stopped being my son when he forged my signature, when he called me incompetent, when he tried to steal 30 years of my work. I just needed to hear you say it. I'm certain. We shook hands, all 3 of us. Traditional business gesture, sealing our pact. This was business now, not family. Business, I understood. Business had rules, precedents, consequences. I left the conference room as evening settled over Seattle. The whiteboard behind me held our battle plan, photographed and saved. In 1 week, Kevin would walk into work expecting another ordinary day. He had no idea his world was about to collapse, and I felt no guilt about that. He'd built this trap himself. I was just going to spring it. 1 week later, Monday morning, 8:47. I stood outside the main conference room at Clark & Morrison Architects, listening to the murmur of voices inside. 15 employees gathering for the mandatory all-hands meeting I'd called Friday afternoon. No explanation given. Just a calendar invitation marked required attendance. I wore my navy blue suit, the one from our first $1 million contract. I'd chosen it deliberately this morning, standing in my closet longer than necessary. Armor for what was coming. Through the glass door, I could see Kevin near the windows, talking with 2 junior architects, coffee cup in hand. Relaxed, confident, he had no idea what was about to happen. I opened the door and walked to the head of the table. Conversation died. Everyone found seats quickly. I remained standing. I've called this meeting to inform you that Clark & Morrison will undergo immediate comprehensive internal audit. I kept my voice level, professional. We've identified irregularities in our documentation and financial procedures that require investigation. Silence. Someone's pen clicked nervously. What kind of irregularities? One of the junior partners, Sarah Chen, asked carefully. Unauthorized access to sensitive documents, questionable expense reports, and concerns about signature authenticity on internal memos. Kevin's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. His face drained of color, going from healthy tan to sickly pale in seconds. This seems extreme, he managed, voice tight. What prompted this? I met his eyes across the table. Due diligence. The audit begins tomorrow. I distributed printed memos. Single page, bullet points, no unnecessary details. Audit timeline. Cooperation requirements. Confidentiality expectations. People read in silence. Some exchange confused glances. Most looked uncomfortable, unsure where to direct their attention. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. When I dismissed them, Kevin was the first to leave, walking quickly toward his office without speaking to anyone. That afternoon, the IT administrator called me. Kevin was attempting to delete files from his computer, frantically according to the keystroke logs. Emails, documents, browser history, everything connected to Marcus Webb and the forged memos. He didn't know we'd backed up the entire server. Every file he was trying to erase existed in triplicate, preserved as evidence. His panic was creating new documentation of guilt, timestamps showing consciousness of wrongdoing. At 4 o'clock, I called Kevin to my office. Dennis and Adams were already there, seated in the chairs facing my desk, witnesses to what was coming. Kevin entered without knocking, his earlier confidence replaced by visible tension. He sat down without being invited, a breach of office protocol that showed how rattled he was. I slid a folder across the desk. These are documents bearing my signature. Documents I never saw, never signed, never approved. He opened the folder. His hands trembled slightly. There must be some mistake. Maybe you forgot. I don't forget my own signature, Kevin. Adams leaned forward. We also have these emails from supposed clients. The IP addresses trace back to your home computer. Kevin's head snapped up. You're investigating me? Your own son? You forged Eugene's signature on company documents. Dennis said quietly. What did you expect? Kevin stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. It hit the wall with a sharp crack. This is insane. You're conducting a witch hunt because you can't handle that. I have better ideas for the company. Better ideas don't require forgery, I said. I'll sue. His voice rose, becoming shrill. This is harassment, age discrimination, hostile work environment. Adams's pen moved across his notepad, recording everything. Threatening legal action while under investigation for fraud isn't wise. Fraud? Kevin's face flushed red now, the opposite of his earlier pallor. You're calling me a criminal? The evidence speaks for itself. My voice stayed quiet, controlled. His escalation made my calm more powerful. He stared at me for a long moment, breathing hard. Then he turned and walked out, leaving his chair where it had fallen. That evening, my phone rang. Jennifer's name on the screen. I answered. How dare you? She was screaming, words tumbling over each other. Kevin called me crying. You're destroying our family. I said nothing. Let her empty herself. He's your son. You're supposed to support him, not attack him like some corporate enemy. You're tearing apart everything we built. The kids are going to hear about this. I'll tell Olivia and Ethan what kind of grandfather they have. Cold, vindictive. Goodbye, Jennifer. I ended the call, set the phone down on my kitchen counter. Outside, Seattle's lights were coming on as darkness settled over the city. I stood at my office window the next morning, watching the parking garage 15 floors below. Kevin's BMW sat alone in the corner where he'd left it the night before. He'd stayed late, probably trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Let him try. Every move he made now just drove him deeper. The audit would take 2 weeks. By the end, everyone would know exactly what he'd done, and I'd be ready for the next phase. 2 weeks later, I arrived at my office at 7:15 in the morning. Seattle fog pressed against the windows, obscuring Elliott Bay completely. The final audit report waited on my desk, 47 pages bound in dark blue covers, stamped with confidential internal audit findings across the front. I'd barely opened it when Dennis arrived, carrying 2 coffees. He set one in front of me without speaking, then took the chair across from my desk. We'd been building toward this moment for weeks. Now it had arrived. The document itemized everything with brutal precision. 23 instances of forged signatures on internal memos, manipulation of client feedback documents, altering dates, fabricating negative comments, unauthorized corporate expenditures totaling $45,000 over 6 months, personal dinners charged as client meetings, luxury items purchased with company cards, cash advances that vanished into Kevin's wallet. $45,000 in 6 months, Dennis said quietly. I knew it was bad, but... Every dinner at Metropolitan Grill charged as client development. The clients were never there. I turned a page, found the expense documentation, Kevin's signature on receipt after receipt, each one a small theft, dressed as business necessity. The board meeting is at 2? Yes, I want this done properly by the book. No questions about procedure. Dennis nodded. They'll vote to terminate. The evidence is overwhelming. I know, but I need it official, documented, unanimous. The board members arrived at 1:45. 3 outside directors appointed when we incorporated, men who understood corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. I'd sent them preliminary summaries yesterday. Their faces told me they'd read every word. We gathered in the main conference room. I distributed copies of the full audit report, watched them review findings they'd only glimpsed before, forged signature comparisons, email trails showing coordination with Marcus Webb, evidence of Kevin accessing confidential partnership agreements he had no authority to review. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on short notice, I began. The audit has revealed serious violations of corporate policy and fiduciary duty. One of the directors, a retired bank executive named Harrison, held up the signature comparison page. Kevin forged your signature 23 times? 23 documented instances. There may be more. Another director leaned forward. The expense reports are blatant fraud. This isn't judgment error. This is theft. Dennis corroborated specific instances he'd witnessed. Kevin's unusual interest in files, late nights in the office when no legitimate work required his presence, evasive answers when questioned about client meetings, that never happened. The third director closed his copy of the report. I move we terminate his position immediately and consider criminal referral. The vote was unanimous, 4-0, with Kevin abstaining by absence. Termination effective immediately. Official grounds: breach of fiduciary duty, violation of corporate ethics policies, destruction of trust essential to leadership positions. His $180,000 annual salary stopped that afternoon. I walked to Kevin's office carrying the termination letter in a sealed envelope. His door was closed, blinds drawn. I knocked. Professional courtesy he hadn't shown me in months. "Come in." He sat behind his desk, trying to project confidence, but his eyes betrayed him, uncertain, searching my face for mercy he wouldn't find. I handed him the envelope. "This is your termination letter, effective immediately." He opened it, read. His face went from pale to red, anger flooding in to replace shock. "You can't do this. I'll sue. This is personal vendetta." Read the grounds: breach of fiduciary duty. The board voted unanimously. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "The board? You didn't even let me defend myself." "The evidence speaks. I need your office keys, company credit cards, and building access badge." "This is insane. I'm your son." I extended my hand, palm up, waited. The silence stretched between us until he finally reached into his pocket and dropped the items into my palm. They felt heavier than they should have. 8 years of position, privilege, and power, reduced to metal and plastic. Within 3 hours, Kevin's new attorney sent a demand letter. Standard wrongful termination threats. Robert Adams called me before I'd finished reading it. Kevin's attorney sent demands. I've responded with the full audit report and a brief statement. Adams sounded almost amused. Your client's documented fraud negates any wrongful termination claim. We welcome litigation if he wishes to make these findings public record. And if he doesn't drop it, then we countersue for the $45,000 in fraudulent expenses, plus legal fees. His attorney will see that and withdraw. That evening, I watched from my office window as Kevin loaded boxes into his Porsche Cayenne, a $95,000 vehicle with $1,200 monthly payments. He didn't know it yet, but that car would be gone within a month. The country club membership, the designer suits, the illusion of success he'd built on my company's money, all of it would crumble, and I'd barely started. 3 days later, I sat in Patricia Wilson's office, overlooking Pioneer Square. I'd chosen her specifically because Kevin didn't know her, an estate planning attorney with no connection to our family or company. She'd built her practice on discretion and precision, exactly what I needed. I placed my current will on her desk, a document drafted 12 years ago, when Kevin was 25 and full of promise. She reviewed it, making notes in careful handwriting. Your current will leaves half your estate to your son, Kevin. You want to change this? Completely. $1 to Kevin. The rest divided between a charitable foundation, my grandchildren's educational trusts, and my business partner, Dennis Morrison. Her pen paused. She looked up, professional neutrality struggling against surprise. I have to ask, this is a significant change. Are you certain? Absolutely. My son attempted to steal my company through fraud and forgery. He's earned exactly $1. She nodded slowly. The $1 prevents him claiming he was accidentally omitted. Smart approach. I'll draft this today and have it ready for your signature tomorrow. I returned to my office to find Robert Adams waiting, a file folder open on his desk. Something in his expression told me he'd found another piece of leverage. Eugene, I found something. The $400,000 for Kevin's house. Part of it went through corporate books. I tried to remember. Kevin said something about tax advantages. It was classified as a corporate advance, not a gift. That makes it a recoverable loan. The implications settled over me. How much? $175,000. We can demand repayment. I sat down, processing this unexpected opportunity. Do it. Add it to what he owes for the fraudulent expenses. Adams drafted the demand letter that afternoon. Kevin received it the same day Jennifer discovered they couldn't make next month's mortgage payment. I learned about their crisis from Dennis, who heard it from a mutual acquaintance. Kevin had called Jennifer in panic. They were sitting at their kitchen table, bills spread between them like evidence of failure. They're demanding $220,000. Kevin's voice carried through their house, audible to neighbors. Corporate loan repayment. plus the expense reimbursement. What corporate loan? You said your father gave us that money. It was a gift. He's twisting it, using paperwork against me. Their savings totaled $23,000. Outstanding debts, $220,000 corporate demand, $827,000 remaining on the mortgage, $35,000 in credit cards, $28,000 in car loans. Monthly expenses exceeded $8,500 minimum. Adams filed a legal lien against Kevin's house within the week. The lien prevented any sale or refinancing until the corporate debt was satisfied. Kevin and Jennifer couldn't sell, couldn't pay, couldn't refinance, couldn't afford to stay. The house Eugene had bought them became the cage trapping them inside their crisis. Jennifer's breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I heard about it later, how she'd confronted Kevin with bills she'd been hiding, trying to protect the illusion of stability for Olivia and Ethan. We're $3,000 short on the mortgage. Credit cards are maxed. We have no income. I'm looking for jobs. No one's hiring yet. Because word is out. Everyone knows what you did. You tried to steal from your own father and got caught. I was trying to build something for us. For our future. Her laugh was bitter, broken. You destroyed our future. We're going to lose everything because you were too greedy to wait. The arguments became daily occurrences. Vicious, exhausting, stripping away whatever remained of their marriage. On Monday morning, Jennifer made her decision. I'm taking the kids to my mother's house. Kevin looked up from the laptop where he'd been searching job postings. For how long? I don't know. I need space. The kids need stability. This house won't be ours much longer anyway. We can fix this. You can't fix anything, Kevin. You never could. You just knew how to take from your father, and now there's nothing left to take. She packed bags carefully, folding Olivia's and Ethan's clothes, while Kevin watched from the doorway. He didn't argue. Couldn't. They both knew she was right. I drove past their house that evening on my way home. Jennifer's SUV was gone from the driveway. Only Kevin's Porsche remained, parked at an angle like he'd pulled in carelessly, defeated. Lights were on in the living room, just one figure visible through the window, sitting motionless. The house that was supposed to be his castle had become his prison, and the walls were closing in. One more move, and the game would be over. 1 week after Jennifer left, my phone rang. Daryl Scott, the private investigator, his voice carrying an urgency I hadn't heard before. I need to see you. Today, if possible. 20 minutes later, he sat across from my desk with a digital recorder and a manila envelope. I cleared the space between us, sensing this was the final piece I'd been waiting for. I wasn't sure you'd want to hear this, Scott said, setting up the recorder. It's brutal. Play it. He pressed a button. Static, then the ambient noise of a restaurant, dishes clattering, muted conversations. Then Kevin's voice, clear and unmistakable. The audit shows Dad's been making questionable decisions. We document a pattern. Build the incompetence case. Another voice, older, professional. Marcus Webb. At 63, a competency challenge isn't unreasonable, especially if we frame it as concern for the company. Jennifer's voice cut through, sharp and eager. How long would the evaluation take? If we push it right, maybe 6 months. During that time, Kevin takes operational control. Kevin again. And if the evaluation shows he's fine? Webb's response was chilling in its calculated cynicism. By then, you've restructured everything. Make it too complicated to undo? I listened twice. Made Scott replay specific sections while I took notes. They'd recorded this 3 weeks before the audit announcement, proof of premeditation, of conspiracy, of intent to destroy my reputation through falsified claims of mental incompetence. How did you get this? I asked. Webb's paralegal. She was uncomfortable with the ethics. Became a source. The recording is legal. Washington's a two-party consent state, but restaurants are considered public spaces. I took the transcript, the audio files, all the documentation. Then I made a phone call to Sarah Mitchell, a business reporter at the Seattle Business Chronicle who'd covered our major projects over the years. We met at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office. I spread the evidence across the table, the recording transcript, the audit report, the forged documents. Mitchell read everything twice, her journalist instincts visibly engaged. Eugene, this is your son. This is a corporate fraud case involving forged documents and attempted theft of a company through falsified incompetency claims. She looked at me for a long moment. You understand, if I publish this, his career in Seattle is finished. He tried to destroy my reputation by claiming I was mentally unfit. I'm simply presenting facts. Can I verify these documents? Everything is authenticated. Your legal team can review it all. 3 days later, the Seattle Business Chronicle ran the story. Front page of the business section. Architectural firm VP attempted hostile takeover of father's company through fraud and forgery. The article detailed everything, Kevin's photo accompanying text that would follow him forever. Within 24 hours, 3 firms that had been interviewing Kevin sent rejection emails. Ethical concerns appeared in all 3. The professional networks he'd built over 8 years evaporated. Former colleagues stopped returning calls. The bank holding Kevin's mortgage read the article, reviewed the lien, and accelerated their foreclosure timeline. Full payment required within 60 days or seizure and sale of the property. Jennifer read the article at her mother's house. She called Kevin. I heard about this conversation later, not to offer support, but to deliver a final verdict. I saw the article. Everyone's seen it. Kevin tried to explain, to justify, but Jennifer cut him off with the precision of someone who'd been rehearsing this moment. You promised me we'd own that company. You said your father would hand it over willingly. Things changed. He was stubborn. No, you were stupid and greedy. You had a position making $180,000 a year, and it wasn't enough. The divorce papers are being filed tomorrow. I'm taking the kids, and you're taking your shame. Kevin sat alone in the empty house, reading the article repeatedly on his laptop. Every door had closed. Every path forward was blocked. The expensive furniture they'd bought on credit surrounded him like monuments to failure. Architectural magazines on the coffee table featuring buildings he'd never work on. The life he'd constructed on lies collapsing room by room. The article stayed online, permanent and searchable. Kevin's name would forever be linked to fraud, forgery, attempted elder exploitation. I'd achieved what I set out to do, protected my company, exposed the truth, delivered justice. But late that night, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Kevin's voice, barely above a whisper, Dad, please, I need to talk to you. I should have hung up, but something in his broken voice made me pause. 1 week before Christmas, I sat in my office at 4 p.m, watching December rain streak the windows. Seattle's skyline was already dark, buildings lit against gray sky. My desk was clear except for a small wrapped box, a gift for Olivia I'd give her this weekend. The door opened. Dennis, about to leave for the day, stopped mid-motion. Kevin stood in the doorway. I'd agreed to this meeting, office, business hours, Dennis present. Kevin had accepted any terms. I'd spent the week preparing for manipulation, more excuses, perhaps another attempt at shifting blame, but the man who entered looked nothing like the son I'd terminated 3 weeks ago. He'd lost at least 15 pounds. Dark circles, hollowed eyes that were bloodshot and defeated. Cheap clothes replaced the designer wardrobe. Dennis had seen him arrive in an Uber. The Porsche key was gone, probably sold to pay debts that couldn't be paid. I gestured for him to sit. He did slowly, like movement hurt. I don't deserve you listening to me. I know that. His voice was hoarse. But I need to say this. I was wrong. About everything. I remained silent. Jennifer pushed me, yes. But that's not an excuse. I let greed blind me. You gave me everything, education, position, trust, and I tried to steal more. He paused, struggling. I've lost the house. The divorce is final next month. No one will hire me. The article comes up in every search. I have nothing. You have what you earned, I said quietly. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Then he broke, genuine, ugly crying that couldn't be faked or manipulated. He covered his face with hands that trembled. I watched my son fall apart and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just the cold clarity of completed justice. 30 years building a company, 8 years trusting him with a position he hadn't earned, 2 months of systematic reckoning. It led here. I let the silence extend until he'd composed himself. Then I spoke. You received a lesson that cost me 30 years of my life in this company. I understand. Let me finish. I can give you a second chance. But not in my company. Not in any leadership position. You will start from zero. He nodded, unable to speak. I'll help you find basic employment. I'll provide housing for you and my grandchildren at reduced rent. But you'll never work for me again. Never use my name to advance yourself. One violation, and I withdraw everything. Thank you. I'll do whatever... Don't thank me. This isn't forgiveness. This is ensuring my grandchildren have shelter, and their father has a chance to become someone worthy of them. I made phone calls while he sat there, contacted carefully chosen acquaintances who wouldn't be working with Clark and Morrison. By the end of the hour, Kevin had an interview scheduled at a smaller firm across town. Junior position, $55,000 a year. Entry-level work despite his age and education. Then I wrote out a rental agreement by hand. A property I owned in Greenwood. 2 bedrooms. $800 a month, significantly below the market rate of $2,200. The property is in Greenwood. $800 a month. His hands shook as he signed. That's very generous. It's significantly below market, but you'll sign a lease with standard terms. Miss a payment, you're out. I won't miss payments, I promise. Your promises aren't worth much. Your actions will determine whether you stay. We didn't shake hands, didn't embrace. Kevin left, and Dennis closed the door behind him. I returned to work immediately. 1 month later, I ran my hand over my new desk surface. I'd remodeled the office, new furniture, new artwork, a fresh chapter physically manifested. Dennis entered carrying champagne and 2 glasses. $4.2 million, he announced. Largest contract in company history. We poured, raised our glasses. To Clark and Morrison, may we never compromise what we've built. To protecting what matters. Dennis smiled. How are the kids? Coming over Saturday. We're building a scale model of the Space Needle. And Kevin? He's their father, not my son. Those are separate relationships now. Saturday morning arrived with winter sunshine. Olivia and Ethan rang my doorbell, faces bright with excitement. We spread architectural model pieces across my living room floor. Grandpa, can this piece go here? Olivia held up a connector. Try it and see. Architecture is about testing ideas. Ethan worked carefully on a difficult joint. When I grow up, can I work at your company? If you earn it. Nothing worth having comes without work. Dad says he's sorry he can't come to these visits, Olivia said quietly. Your dad and I have our own arrangement, but you two are always welcome here. Later, in my study, I looked at a photograph of Olivia and Ethan. Not Kevin. I'd learned to separate love for my grandchildren from respect for myself. Kevin was my son, but that hadn't given him the right to steal from me. Protecting what I'd built wasn't cruelty. It was justice. I'd spent 2 months teaching my son the cost of betrayal, but in the process, I'd learned something more valuable. That protecting what you've built isn't revenge. It's respect for yourself and for everyone who helped you build it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.